Let's start this video with the most important thing, the quality of stabilization this gimbal produces. And I can tell you that it works amazingly well. Most of the time I work with super wide angle lenses, which are the easiest for stabilizers. But this shot, for example, was taken with 30mm on a crop sensor camera, and it looks great too. Here I used 30mm and even made a turn while walking. Also works perfectly well. The Moza Air comes in this huge case with a lot of accessory, which I show one by one. The gimbal itself basically looks, balances and works like any gimbal, so there really isn't much to say about. The camera gets directly screwed onto the gimbal, so there is no base plate. But I personally anyway always have a Manfrotto quick release system attached. I just slide my camera in and it's immediately perfectly balanced. The gimbal comes with 3 batteries, which last for 8 hours. They are stored in the handle of the gimbal and then screwed on the rest of the gimbal. This is a good system because the gimbal is actually pretty large. Too large to fit into my camera bag. But because the handle can be screwed off, it still fits into my bag like that. This button turns the gimbal on. With the joystick, the gimbal can be maneuvered and pressing the joystick changes between different modes. Most of the time I use a Sony Alpha camera on the gimbal, but I can also use my Canon 80D without problems. Also connecting a microphone to the camera is fine for the gimbal. It can be used with a payload up to 2.5 kg. The case also includes 2 extra handles. I guess it's a matter of preference whether you use them or not. I personally always want to stay as light and flexible as possible. That's why I don't use them. But talking about light and flexible, when filming weddings I always have one camera as handheld camera and one on the gimbal. So while I use the gimbal, I just let the handheld camera hang down. But when I use the handheld, I have to put the gimbal somewhere, what can be a struggle. The Moza Air has this screw hole which I can use for my body strap. Now I can simply let the gimbal hang down when I use the handheld camera. I love it. The Moza Air also has a screw hole at the bottom. This can be used to attach the in the box included tripod legs. So now your camera can stand and be navigated remotely. Yes, there is an app to remote control the gimbal and it's super easy to use. You can make all kind of adjustments with the app. But not only this, there is an optional thumb controller with which the gimbal can be controlled from many meters away. The thumb controller has a special mode which is called mimic motion control. The movement of the thumb controller controls the gimbal directly. Pretty impressive feature. And a last feature I want to introduce is the time-lapse feature. Cables for Canon, Panasonic and Sony are included. You connect the cable to the gimbal and the camera, and in the app you make all kind of settings and set up the path the gimbal should take. The gimbal then remotely triggers the cameras to take pictures. Only limitation to note, the shutter speed duration has to be at least 1 second, so under daylight you have to use a ND filter. My conclusion, most importantly, the stabilizing of this gimbal works fantastically well. No jittering and all the movements are super smooth and easy to make. Also the build quality is excellent and the gimbal looks very nice as well. On top of that, this gimbal has a ton of special features. And all of this for a pretty affordable price. I am super happy with this gimbal and recommend it without hesitation.